It's been almost exactly 2 years, and finally, the pandemic is dissipating. We made our choices, we learned our lessons, and it's a new dawn. And it's a new season for the year 2022, and a new time for all of us to embrace new life, new opportunities, new abundance. And while we balance our care and genuine prayer for peace and the awareness of a world that still includes unthinkable tragedy and sorrow and even war, we also are grateful for how blessed we are. And so let us use this spring of 2022 to take everything that we've learned, clear the past, and move forward in gratitude for the freedom that we have, for the blessings of our lives, for the opportunity to come together again in community, online, and yes, in person. We are all part of the awakening world, and we all have the roles that we're playing as individuals and collectively. We are the imaginal cells finding each other to create a beautiful, incredible butterfly out of the old paradigm. So welcome to spring of 2022. Welcome to the awakening world.
We come from the same source, a powerful love force. We're coming together, stronger than ever, not divided. We come from the same source, a powerful love force. We're coming together, hear the call, you are invited. We come from the same source, a powerful love force.
Welcome, everybody, to the Awakening World in our early show. And I always enjoy this part of the evening when we get to connect with kind of our closest friends and fans. And a lot of you already know what to do. You're giving us your name and where you're from. And I see, of course, a lot of our regulars and our dear friends from Virginia and New Mexico and California, Florida, North Carolina. And Dorina, all the way from Ecuador. John Perkins is with us, and he's got a whole relationship to Ecuador. So welcome, Dorina. Welcome, everybody coming on in. Please continue to let us know where you're from geographically. And tonight, it's all about celebrating this wonderful, wonderful book, Our Moment of Choice, which I'm reaching for right now. This is what we're celebrating. And I'm so grateful. I've been having the wonderful opportunity to collaborate with Reverend Deborah Moldow. And she is my partner on this weekend's shows. She's my co-host, my colleague. And as you can see, she's very much about our moment of choice.
Thank you so much, Scott, for this opportunity for us to spend the whole weekend celebrating this book. Oh, yeah. The co-editors of this book, myself, along with Dr. Kurt Johnson, who's one of your guests tonight, and Bob Atkinson, had the privilege of editing these brief pieces from 43 members of our Evolutionary Leaders community. So it's an amazing anthology chock full of wisdom and lots of ideas for how to really move into a future that allows us to thrive once again.
Well, you mentioned Kurt Johnson, and guess what? He's in the house. So let's just bring him right on. And welcome, Kurt. I've really been enjoying getting to know you this past year through Evolutionary Leaders Network and through this book. And I want to bring on one other guest, and I'm actually so grateful to have John Perkins with us. And we'll do like the big introductions in the main show. But John, I want you to know that For the last 12 years plus, my favorite nonprofit organization has been Pachamama Foundation. And I'm almost a little starstruck whenever I've got you on one of my shows because I am so fond of Pachamama and what the story. I learned how to teach the Awakening the Dreamer Symposium. So I've given it many times. And I just want to say thank you, John. Thank you for your work in the world as an author. But I want to take a minute just to say I really love the work and what you have created, of course, along with many others with Pachamama.
Well, thank you, Scott. And thank you for doing the Awakening the Dreamer program, for being one of the facilitators. Very much appreciate that. And, we're at a very unique time. And I think the Pachamama Alliance began to see this back in it was the early 1990s when we first get going. We officially got started in 95, 96, but I was working with indigenous people in the Amazon. Well, I go back into the late 60s, but and they have been saying for a long time that we are at this moment of choice. All the prophecies from many different indigenous cultures have told us that this would be a time when we would be faced with some very critical and significant choices.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to ask you a little bit about that. I think I'm going to have a bit of an animal theme. You have a really interesting relationship to the jaguar, so I'm going to ask you about that. And then I'm going to ask Kurt about his relationship to the butterfly, because we often talk about how humankind is going through a transition similar to the caterpillar and the butterfly. But tell us a little bit about your relationship to that incredible jungle cat.
Well, let me see if I can bring one into the picture. Okay, I'm not sure whether
Far out.
I'm not sure whether she'll cooperate or not, but let's give it a try.
Now, this is the anticipation's building here.
Sheldon joins me on these programs.
Oh my God, look at her.
She's grown. She doesn't fit on your shoulder anymore.
She sometimes does sit up here, but she's very independent minded these days. And her name, oh, there we go.
A little love nip.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. But her name is Jaggy, and she came to me at 8 weeks old, the day that the book Touching the Jaguar was published. So, and she, I swear she's got jaguar blood. She's very sweet and loving at times, but man, if you try to get her to do something like that, she doesn't want to know. She just gives you this little nip. No, that's not what I'm into right now. And I've learned her language. That's part of the important part of it. But the relationship with the jaguar. So, the indigenous people, the Shwa, the Achwa, the Quichua, many of the different people in the Amazon, for them, the jaguar is a very sacred animal. And it's an animal they often see when they do vision quests. And when you're on a vision quest and you see a jaguar, you're invited, you're told to go out and touch it, because the jaguar represents something that's holding you back. So, anything that you want to do in life, if there's something that's keeping you from doing it, or if there's something that's putting you in a situation that you don't really want to be in. For example, when I was in the Peace Corps in the Amazon in 1969, I was dying. I was very sick, and it turned out that a lot of that was my mindset. And so the way to get through that is to touch the jaguar and see how your mindset changes, see how your perceptions change. Our lives reality is created by our perceptions. Mm-hmm. When you come right down to it, there's no United States, there's no China, there's no religion, there's no culture, there's no corporations except as we perceive them. And when enough people accept a perception, it becomes a reality, and it has a huge impact on reality. Another way of looking at that is a perception that the Amazonian people tend to call it the dream. And what keeps us in our old perceptions, they say, is the jaguar. It's standing there in the trail. It's standing on this bridge of perceptual bridge, they say, from one reality to another. It's standing there stopping us. And if we run from it, it'll chase us. We won't ever get through that barrier. But if we touch it, then it gives us the power, the energy to change our perceptions. And when we do that, we change our reality.
That's powerful. And tell us just a little bit about your book, and then we'll go to Kurt and Deb.
Well, that book, which came out almost a year ago now, 2 years ago, goes into that. It's sort of a book to be a transition between the 5 books I've written on indigenous people and shamanism, and the 4 on economic hitmen, which are actually the more popular ones, the bestsellers. But the one I'm working on right now is about how China and the United States need to change our perceptions and realize that if we don't come together to fight climate change, to end climate change, and to create what I call a life economy, to transform the death economy, an economic system that's failing us, into one that will be successful, which we call a life economy. If the United States and China can't work together to make this happen, the future looks extremely bleak. Yeah. So this is one of those moments of choice. And we can disagree with China on many, many, many issues, Taiwan and Tibet and the Uyghurs and all sorts of things. They can disagree with us on many issues also. But if we can't agree on this one big issue, where the 2 most powerful nations in the world economically and the 2 greatest polluters, if we don't come together to take a leadership role and to really hold hands through this, to touch that jaguar that has told us that the Chinese are bad, we can't work with them, they're enemy number 1, and they're being told the Americans are bad, we can't work with them. If we can't break through that barrier, touch that jaguar, we're in for a lot of trouble. And so that's what the book that'll come out next February is about.
Wow, well, thank you for giving us that little sneak preview of that. And you're right. I mean, what a big moment of choice. We've got to stop the enemy images and come together. We just had our Earth Day show a couple of weeks ago, and had a lot of wonderful environmental leaders like Claire Dubois and Dwayne Elgin talking. And of course, for any of us who are studying it, it's terrifying what's happening. And it's like, talk about moment of choice. I'm going to bring Rev Deb back up, and I'm going to bring Kurt back up. Kurt, so often in our shows, we talk about the analogy of the old paradigm represented as the caterpillar that, is not sustainable and then dies and goes into the goo, and the cells, the imaginal cells, find each other and become the butterfly. And it's a beautiful analogy, hopefully, for what's happening with humankind. But I just learned a few minutes ago that you have a very special relationship to butterflies. Now, you're going to be on our show many times, but I thought this is a moment with our closest friends and fans. Tell us a little bit about your unique relationship to butterflies. You're still muted.
I just muted myself. All right. Yeah, so I think many of you know that my doctorate is in evolution, and I was at the American Museum of Natural History for nigh on 30 years now. Where I got lucky is my specialty group is butterflies. Think about it, could have been fleas or ticks. So I got lucky. And my last book on that, just so you get to see a butterfly, is this book from Yale University Press. But anyway, point being, and it goes actually to what John was saying, I think the metaphor that's really fascinating when it comes to butterflies and jaguars is this balance between nature as seen by the shaman and nature as seen by the scientist, because they're really the icon of hopefully the Homo sapiens of the future is the species that has the deepest of our subjective knowledge and spiritual experience at its fore, and also the deepest of our objective scientific and technological knowledge at our fore. That's the species that could make this planet the paradise that our heart tells us is possible. So I think, the butterfly that's on that journey from being that caterpillar to being that butterfly that's flying, absolutely, it's a great metaphor, just like the phoenix of where our species has to go because we know that's our potential. I think it's as simple as that. And that's actually what the book, Our Moment of Choice, was about, because its subtitle is Evolutionary Visions and Hope for the Future. So enough said, I think, for my little round.
Oh, well, we'll come back to you for sure. Rev Deb, I am bringing you up. I just learned yesterday about your history as an actress, and I can totally see that. I can totally see you doing musical theater, and one of the thoughts I had that I wanted to ask you, um, how in going through the people that are in the book, Barbara Marx Hubbard is in the book, and of course, Barbara is no longer with us in body, but she's been such an influence on us. And actually, what I was going to ask you, but we didn't get a chance, I was going to ask you if you wanted to read a segment of our moment of choice from what Barbara wrote. Because as I look at all these people, most of them are still alive, most are still in body. I don't know if anybody else has left their body other than Barbara. But she's such an icon to all of us. And so I had a fantasy, but we didn't get a chance to chat today about if you would like to read a little bit of the book, and if you wanted to read a little bit of what Barbara had to write.
Well,
Or you could share with us.
I would be delighted to do that in a few minutes, if you give me a few minutes to take a
Absolutely.
look and pick out the right passage. But first, I'd love to say something about these two amazing gentlemen that just spoke.
Well, then let me put them on camera with you so they can see their wonderful responses to your love.
Yes, well, as director of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, it's my privilege to love 240 ELs, each one for their unique contribution and many contributions, as is the case with these two especially. And one of the things that John and Kurt have in common that I think really speaks to the new paradigm that we are all hoping will emerge through all of us co-creating it, is that they both have one foot in science and one foot in spirit.
Mm.
And I think this coming together of science and spirit is one of the hallmarks of this time. And you know, John's work as an economist and participating in all of the activities that he later came to regret and wrote about in Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And yet he was so deeply influenced by his experience in the Peace Corps, where he was trained by a shaman. And that, you know, completely changed his worldview. Like he touched that jaguar and he rode it into the future. And our Dr. Kurt Johnson, whose background is in science, as he was just talking about, and he's written so many articles and books about science. And yet he spent years as a Christian contemplative monk. And he studied Advaita and many traditions of the world's religions. So there is that marvelous coming together in these people and in what they've written in Our Moment of Choice, of those two directions of human philosophical endeavor that are becoming, they're coming together in a balance now that we lost during that whole modern expansion of science and technology across the globe. So that's one of the reasons why I think they're both really important and have made extraordinary contributions to our world today.
I agree with you. Absolutely. All right, you've got 3 minutes to figure out what you're going to read because we've got 10 minutes left or 9 minutes left. You know, gentlemen, she brought up a really good point, and that is that we are living in a time in which our most ancient science, our most ancient spirituality, or the Sanskrit Vedic scriptures talk about Brahman having 26 principles of God, and quantum physics says that there are 26 principles of the unified field, and those two correlate. So we are living in this amazing time of ancient spiritual wisdom and modern science coming together and telling us the same thing, that we are truly one. We are in this ever-changing unified field of molecules. We are in the oneness of God. As scientists, as spiritual leaders and teachers and aspirants, how do you really feel about our chances? This is a powerful time, and we all obviously hope for the best. I love, John, what you've brought into my consciousness. I really hadn't thought about how important it is for China and the United States to really hold hands and to create peace. You brought that into my awareness right now, and I really haven't had that thought until right now. So what are your thoughts about some of the other things that we as individuals can do, whether it's holding vision or actual practical actions, so that humankind does make it into butterfly and a new paradigm? What are your thoughts? And I'll leave it up to, I'm going to keep you both on camera and love to hear what you both have to say.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
You're both such gentlemen.
You first.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I spend a lot of time with scientists, because you may or may not know that in 2015, the evolutionary paradigm was upended by what's known now as group and multi-level selection, whereby supercomputers, we discovered that when groups make decisions, they make them for the good of the whole. And that's a kind of natural selection that is not the Darwinian competition model. And it proved that where we're moving as a species and why nature tends to work so well is because it moves toward altruism. But long story real short, you're absolutely right that science now is struggling between these two cosmologies that we've inherited globally, and asked John to comment about that, between whether consciousness actually comes from material or whether actually material comes from consciousness. One is the Vedic view, of course, from the millennia of the great wisdom traditions, and the other one is the view of reductionist science, which has gotten us to the moon, but has also caused us a lot of problems. So I'm also, given the question that you asked, I'm watching to see where this is going to land, because are we going to be able to, as a species, make our decision in one that really serves love, happiness, and the paradise this earth could actually be. So with that, over to Mr. Jaguar, John.
Well, I love what you said, Kurt. I think, it's almost beyond materialism to a reality. And reality can be expressed materialistically, but it can also be expressed on other levels. And again, it's this perception that molds our reality, and it molds our materialism. If we have a perception that our success is defined by how many things we have, that famous bumper sticker of he or she who dies with the most toys wins. It's a horrible perception, but it's one that has kind of controlled us. That was my Jaguar knocking things over. Sorry. She's anyway. So this perception, and I think what you brought up about community is so very, very important. Because having lived and spent a lot of time and continue every year spending time with indigenous people, particularly in the Amazon, but also in Central America, they're very community oriented. I don't want to idealize indigenous people. There are crazy ones, there are violent ones, there are psychotic ones, and there are brilliant ones and compassionate ones. They're human. But what I do idealize is that they have this long-term view of taking care of community. And in a way, the Chinese share that view, the Confucian aspect. And again, I don't want to glorify the Chinese. They do a lot of bad things, but this idea of community. And I think today we need to understand that we must come together as a global community. I love the idea of localization. I think we need to do much more of that, but also at the same time to recognize that climate change is a global problem, and the death economy is a global problem, and things like climate change and species extinctions and income inequality, these are symptoms of this death economy. So the way that we must deal with this global problem is globally.
Mhm.
And we must see ourselves as a human community, that my 14-year-old grandson is not going to inherit a very livable world, a world that any of us would recognize, if his counterparts in China and Africa and Latin America and all over the world don't also inherit a livable world where everybody can live well, can live according to their needs at least. And that's very important for us to understand, that we are a global community, you know. And I think this pandemic has taught us that in a big way.
Yeah.
It's impacted everyone, and it's brought us together virtually as a global community in so many respects. It's made that possible.
Yeah, and as some of you know, I had the opportunity just before COVID to accompany Dr. David Sloan Wilson, who's the father of this new paradigm in science, which is now the mainstream, accompany him to the Dalai Lama's home in India to talk exactly about this question of how can we as a world check our worldviews at the door, follow the heart, and go down this road together that's about values and ethics and the aspirations that we all share. That's going to be the real challenge. And of course, we're up against so many narcissists and despots who are in positions of power, but somehow maybe we can make that transition. Let's hope.
Well, this is the perfect introduction to a very short passage from the late Barbara Marx Hubbard. This is some of her last writing. And the part that I would like to read for you is the opening paragraphs of her chapter in Our Moment of Choice, which is called A Synergistic Convergence of the Whole. So Barbara Marx Hubbard writes, "We are at the epicenter, the crisis of birth of a new humanity. Planetary evolution will either quickly spiral downward or jump to the next stage of human evolution. We can activate this natural birth process within ourselves as we all bring out our evolutionary leadership capacities together. Just as the evolutionary process has worked in the past to bring us here at this precise moment of our collective development, we can reach this next level of our conscious evolution through a synthesis of the whole, by convening people in a way that evolves us from separate beings toward a whole system greater than the sum of our separate parts, a synergistic process to connect our own visions, dreams, and deepest desires into a new system already exists and has been used in a variety of settings, transcending win-lose systems and moving us toward a more synergistic, holistic culture." Thank you, Barbara Marx Hubbard.
Oh, thank you for that beautiful reading.
She is guiding us still.
I believe that. I totally do believe that. And wow, last night I just got the hit. It would be really cool to have Rev Deb read a little bit of Barbara. So the inspiration paid off.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Kurt. And thank you, Zoom Roomers. I want to acknowledge that there's some great comments that Connie and Jeff and Dr. Laura wrote. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to read them, but I've been reading them myself, and they're beautiful. And we need to get ready to go live on Facebook. So I am going to do that.